Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we break down complex industry analyses into the key insights you need to stay ahead. Today, we are tackling one of the most dynamic, high-pressure industries on the planet, global aviation.
It's an ecosystem that's just defined by relentless change, massive costs. But what's so fascinating in the source material for this is the strategic framework they use to understand it. It's not just, economic models. It's actually based on Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass.
Right, which is where we get the two-queen hypothesis. It's this framework that strategists are using to map out the future of flight. Think of the whole industry as this constant, high-speed chess game. And it's governed by the two opposing forces of the red queen and the white queen.
The red queen dynamic is, it's pure reactive competition. It's defined by that famous line. Now here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. This is what strategists call exploitation. You're doing what you already do, but you're just trying to do it faster, cheaper, better, all the time. It's this continuous reactive innovation just to hold on to your spot.
Okay, so let's unpack that. If you stop running, you don't just, lose a little market share. You could become strategically irrelevant almost overnight. But then you have the white queen who offers the complete counter strategy.
Exactly. She represents proactive change, foresight, collaboration. Her whole thing is visionary exploration. It's that quote, "Sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast."
I love that.
It's a mindset that really captures anticipative innovation. It's about taking the time to design the future and, crucially, working with others to make these huge, seemingly impossible changes actually happen. And the big takeaway here is that sustainable success in aviation isn't about choosing one queen over the other.
So it's not as simple either.
No, not at all. Far from it. Success really depends on achieving this hybrid strategic balance.
Yeah.
You need agility to respond to the market, but that has to be matched with regulatory compliance, trust, and really deep long-term planning. And that's our mission for this deep dive, to explore how these two competing forces drive strategy, from the biggest airframe manufacturer right down to a small regional carrier.
Let's jump right into the Red Queen's relentless race then. The aviation industry, with its razor-thin margins and huge operating costs, it really is a living embodiment of this dynamic. The second you ease up, a competitor just swoops in with a newer plane, a cheaper fare, or a better route.
Yeah, and the sources highlight that this pressure is really fueled by 3 sort of inescapable drivers. First up is market dynamics. External shocks in aviation seem to get hit with more of those than almost any other industry. Things like geopolitical events, economic downturns, or, a global health crisis.
Right.
They demand this unwavering agility. You have to change flight schedules, ground entire fleets, renegotiate supply chains, basically instantly.
And then there's the constant technological arms race. It's not really optional, is it? You have to adopt the new tech. We're talking about massive investments, from the next generation of fuel-efficient engines to AI-driven systems that optimize millions of decisions a day. If your competitor cuts their fuel burn by 15%, you have to match that, or you're just not competitive on price.
And critically, there's the rapid shift in consumer preferences. Today, you and I demand instant booking, personalized experiences, good connectivity, and increasingly, a real demonstrable commitment to sustainability. This forces this continuous, expensive refinement of services just to keep passengers flying with you. Brand loyalty, as the source notes, is fleeting. It's earned on every single flight.
It's exhausting just listening to that. It sounds less like a strategic plan and more like a permanent state of high alert anxiety for a CEO. So to ground this pressure, our sources use the PESTLE framework to categorize all these external factors that airlines are constantly running from.
PESTLE is a great lens here because it just shows the complexity. It's not just about competing with other companies. You're competing against the entire global environment. Let's just look at a couple of key drivers of that pressure.
Okay, let's start with the political and economic side of things.
So on the political side, that Red Queen pressure means constant adaptation. You have to comply with complex, always shifting global safety and environmental regulations. Even a tiny change in a bilateral agreement between 2 countries can make a profitable route totally uneconomical overnight. And economically, the whole industry is a battleground against volatility, especially with fuel prices and, big swings in passenger demand.
Which brings us to technology and the environment. The technological side is what's driving so much of the change, right? Forcing everyone to invest in aircraft design, data analytics for everything from pilot training to baggage handling.
And the environmental pressure is arguably the newest and maybe the most expensive part of this Red Queen race. It demands this relentless push towards sustainability, and that's driven by public expectation and regulatory goals. If you're not seen to be investing in emissions reduction, you're facing reputational damage and fines. All of these things, political, economic, tech, environmental, they're all forcing you to keep running and keep spending.
That is the Red Queen in total overdrive. The race for efficiency, for survival, by exploiting what you already have. But if that's the short-term goal, what happens to the long game?
And that is exactly where the White Queen steps in. If the Red Queen is about short-term survival and efficiency, the White Queen is that necessary strategic counterbalance. She's focused on foresight and the strategic power of collaboration. Her whole world is anticipative innovation, where the industry works together to shape a future that's defined by systemic stability, not just internal competition.
But wait a second, if airlines are locked in this cutthroat Red Queen race, why on earth would they ever choose to cooperate? Doesn't sharing research and aligning standards just sort of stifle the very breakthrough innovation the Red Queen demands?
It's a great question. And the answer, really, it lies in systemic risk. What's so interesting here is that the most critical areas in aviation require collaboration, because the penalty for one company failing is catastrophic for everyone. No one wins if the system itself fails.
Safety and regulation, that has to be the prime example.
Absolutely. Safety is the absolute bedrock of the White Queen strategy, and you get there through deep cooperation, shared incident reports, industry-wide safety audits, setting these universally high standards. Manufacturers work with regulators globally, sometimes even sharing proprietary data, just because public trust in the airframe itself is paramount, no matter which airline is flying it.
And we see that same collective need when you look at the huge issue of environmental sustainability.
Correct. Tackling the industry's massive carbon footprint requires everyone to work together. A single airline just can't solve this alone. The sources really emphasize these big industry-wide initiatives for developing sustainable aviation fuels, or SAFF. That is pure exploration. Developing a new sustainable fuel source is one of those impossible things that requires everyone to believe in it before breakfast.
And pioneering the next big thing, like commercial supersonic travel, is just too expensive for one company to handle all that risk. You need that collaboration between airlines, research institutions, and the big manufacturers.
And we see this cooperation in more familiar business alliances, too. Code-sharing agreements, those huge airline alliances like Star Alliance or SkyTeam, airport partnerships, they're all examples of these symbiotic relationships that let companies share resources and extend their networks without each one having to build a whole global system from scratch.
So the ability to manage this tension, this strategic tension between Red Queen competition, which is exploitation, and White Queen collaboration, which is exploration. That's what our sources call organizational ambidexterity. You have to be brilliant at running the race while you're also building the track for the future.
And that tension is constant. To manage it, leaders rely really heavily on foresight tools. They have to move beyond just reacting to the latest quarterly results.
Right. Forecasting is the bedrock, but the sources are clear that the old way of doing it, just looking at historical trends, it's just not good enough anymore. The industry is too volatile. Modern methods have to use advanced statistical and computational techniques to account for all these massive external variables.
A great example they cited is the use of Monte Carlo simulations.
For anyone who's not familiar, Monte Carlo simulations are where you run thousands, maybe tens of thousands of random scenarios based on probabilities. It gives you a whole range of potential outcomes instead of just one single and often wrong prediction.
Exactly. So if you're an airline, instead of predicting one single price for jet fuel next quarter, you run 10,000 versions of next quarter. From a geopolitical crisis that spikes crude oil to a huge new fine that lowers it. You model all these scenarios, and you base your hedging strategy on the most robust outcome. It's vital for demand projections, scheduling, pricing, risk management.
But forecasting gives you the data, and scenario planning gives you the context. This is the strategic compass that helps an organization actually imagine and prepare for multiple different futures. It lets them build adaptive strategies no matter what happens.
The sources illustrate this perfectly with 3 key scenarios that capture this dual queen dynamic. We can look at the extremes and then the ideal hybrid.
Okay, let's start with a pure Red Queen scenario. So imagine a nimble startup that specializes in regional drone cargo. They enter the market using really rapid iterations, frequent software updates, and they quickly undercut traditional carriers on short-haul logistics. The winning strategy there is pure agile adaptation and fast-track innovation, exploitation at its best.
And then you have the pure White Queen scenario. A major aircraft manufacturer invests heavily in long-term R&D, and they meticulously follow a 10-year regulatory and safety framework before they release some groundbreaking electric passenger aircraft. Their strategy is all about reliability and compliance. They prioritize trust and collaboration over speed.
And the hardest one, but with the biggest payoff, is the hybrid approach scenario. Say, an industry consortium developing supersonic passenger jets. This means they have to combine the rapid innovation of the Red Queen with the meticulous collaborative adherence to safety, noise, and environmental standards of the White Queen. It needs both.
And these scenarios are so important because they show that strategy isn't about predicting the future. It's about preparing for multiple futures at the same time.
This all sounds great in the boardroom, but let's see these strategies in action. Our sources had some excellent case studies of industry leaders who are navigating this duality using these exact tools.
Yeah, let's start with Delta Airlines. They are a textbook example of using scenario planning for resilience. Delta used it to anticipate not just typical business risks, but those high-impact, low-probability events like severe fuel price spikes or a global political unrest.
So how did that foresight actually translate into action on the ground?
Well, it led to really tangible strategic investments, specifically a diversified and more fuel-efficient fleet that gave them a ton of flexibility. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and demand just vanished, a lot of airlines were stuck with these high fixed costs from big inefficient planes. Delta's earlier foresight let them ground older aircraft, rely on their smaller, more efficient models, and slash their fixed costs. They weathered that storm far better than competitors who were just focused on maximizing their current operations.
Okay, now let's slip to the manufacturing side. Boeing relies heavily on long-term forecasting of global market demand. What did that tell them?
Their forecasting predicted a big increase in long-haul, point-to-point travel instead of the old hub-and-spoke model dominating. And crucially, they also foresaw a persistent rising pressure on fuel costs. This combined insight led directly to the massive investment in the 787 Dreamliner, which was designed specifically for that long-haul economy and efficiency. It's a perfect blend of Red Queen efficiency and White Queen long-term vision.
And meanwhile, their main competitor, Airbus, was also using deep scenario planning. What were they focused on?
Airbus was heavily focused on preparing for future regulatory challenges, especially really stringent environmental rules and that constant threat of rising fuel costs. This White Queen foresight directly influenced their investments in eco-efficient models, like the A320neo, the new engine option, and the A350XWB. These planes were specifically designed to meet future environmental goals, which positioned Airbus perfectly to attract airlines looking to future-proof their fleets.
And finally, Emirates. They show how forecasting can fuel really aggressive but calculated growth.
Oh, absolutely. Based in Dubai, Emirates used extremely aggressive market demand forecasting to guide their huge fleet expansion, especially their big bet on the Airbus A380. The forecast was clear. Dubai's geographic position would let it dominate the long-haul international market as this global crossroads. Their whole strategy was to maximize capacity on those routes to achieve market dominance. Pure exploitation.
These examples really underscore that forecasting and scenario planning, they're synergistic, aren't they? They are the tools organizations use to translate that theoretical hybrid strategy into real products and actual operational resilience.
Correct. The ultimate winning strategy is that hybrid adaptive approach. It's integrating the Red Queen's continuous innovation with the White Queen's stability and standards.
So if that's the strategy, how do organizations actually execute it on the ground? We need to talk about the operational engine that makes this ambidexterity possible.
That engine is called Dynamic Resource Configuration, or DRC. It's a framework that lets organizations continuously evolve their resources to balance exploration, finding new opportunities, and exploitation, getting the most out of their existing strengths. It's the practical roadmap.
Okay, that sounds like some serious corporate jargon. Could you walk us through what dynamic resource configuration actually looks like in practice? For instance, what does flexible resource allocation really mean for a team?
It means you have to, break down those old walls. DRC involves a few key components working together. You need dedicated technology innovation centers, which are focused purely on exploring emerging tech, like electric propulsion or hydrogen fuel. And they're often shielded from the daily Red Queen pressure of just keeping the planes flying.
And to make sure those ideas don't just stay stuck in a research lab, you create cross-functional task forces. You blend expertise engineering, finance, operations to work on projects that actually integrate that new technology into the existing system.
And this leads right to flexible resource allocation. It means the same top engineer who's maintaining the efficiency of the 737 fleet today, can be quickly moved to the Sustainable Fuels Lab for 6 months to contribute their operational knowledge. Resources, so capital, talent, time, they get redirected from established projects to emerging opportunities based on real-time market changes, rather than being stuck in rigid annual budgets.
And underpinning all of it, the lifeblood of this ambidexterity has to be data-driven decision-making. You need robust analytics to capture market trends and immediately guide those resource allocation decisions. Without reliable data, you're just guessing which queen to follow.
Precisely. By adopting this kind of dynamic structure, aviation organizations gain that ambidextrous capability. They can not just survive the relentless race, but actually lead it by shaping the future.
Which brings us right back to our starting point. The success of the entire aviation industry relies on mastering the strategic dance between the reactive, competitive race of the Red Queen and the proactive, collaborative vision of the White Queen. And it's all supported by these powerful foresight tools. It gives organizations the ability to not just run in the race, but to actively shape where the race is going.
His whole strategic analysis, though, it does raise an interesting philosophical question that the sources touched on. And it's a vital one for you, the learner, to think about further. If aviation leaders are so focused on surviving this relentless pace and maximizing efficiency, how do they reconcile that with the greater ethical demands being placed on them?
Our sources bring up two ancient philosophical views, Stoicism and cynicism. The Stoic perspective would emphasize operational excellence, personal virtue, resilience. You accept the Red Queen's race as inevitable, and you focus on what you can control, like efficiency and stability.
But the cynic view fundamentally questions the purpose of the whole system. The cynic would question the industry's relentless pursuit of profit and growth itself. They'd argue that this obsession with competition can lead to shortcuts or, minimizing ethical and sustainable practices.
So the provocative thought for you to consider is this. When you're managing the inevitable turbulence of the Red Queen's race, how can industry leaders effectively balance that stoic focus on operational excellence, just doing the job perfectly, with the cynic's fundamental questioning of the industry's purpose and the ethical cost of its relentless pursuit of growth? That's something to keep running with.